I think the biggest misconception is as exorcists, our life is much like what people see in Hollywood, where every single session is that sensationalism that you tend to see.
Yeah, I'm sure there's all kinds of misunderstandings, especially from just in general, in the general population and among Catholics as well. It's not like the movies.
Hollywood just completely gets it wrong. I mean, it takes and exaggerates a lot of the stuff about obsession and possession.
People have been telling me that I was the only one that would bless houses and that would do the work of the society. And so people were actually said to me, "You should be an exorcist." Why would I want to be an exorcist? Yeah.
So I think the biggest misconception is that that's what's interesting about an exorcist's life, is seeing those things, when in point in fact, after you've seen them numerous times, that becomes rather dull. The most important thing that we see is the advance in holiness among the people that are afflicted that we help, but also the reality of the fact that it's the lives of the saints, it's God, Our Lady, and the saints. That's what's the most interesting thing about it. And I think the misconception is that that's the boring part, is the saints, when actually that's the most interesting part. It's actually the stuff about the demons that's the most boring part. My name is Father Chad Ripperger. I'm the Superior General of the Society of the Most Sorrowful Mother. So we are a semi-contemplative society, which means we pray 3 to 4 hours a day, and those 3 to 4 hours are structured in order to provide us both the protection as exorcists, but then also to provide the prayers and the graces necessary for those who are afflicted that we work with, who may be afflicted anywhere from diabolic obsession all the way to possession. Our primary apostolate, according to our statutes, is to pray. So we're semi-contemplative. We pray 3 to 4 hours. But then our secondary apostolate is to do exorcism work, and that's the only other pastoral work, we would say. That's the only other priestly work that we do other than praying.
Father Joshua Stengel from Arkansas originally. I've been here with the Society for about 1.5 years, since October of 2021. The particular things that drew me here first is the first part of the charism here is not the apostolate, is not the ministry, but the first part of the charism is a semi-contemplative life. And so that it's ordered properly, first to God, first to the praise of God, that we're looking at our duties towards God first, and then our work is second, and having that focus in that way.
I'm Father Carl Millis. I was a diocesan priest for about 23 years, and then felt called to come to the Dolorans to participate in the deliverance ministry. Part of what drew me here was the semi-contemplative life as well, and having that as an aspect, very different from what the diocesan priesthood was, which was, very busy, constantly on the go, and now finding that draw to the contemplative life, but still having an active ministry.
I'm Father Dan McKelleran. I was ordained for the Archdiocese of Hartford, Connecticut in 2001, and I spent 13 years there. And the Archbishop graciously gave me permission to come out to Oklahoma to help Father start the society in Oklahoma when we were there. So in 2014, I left Hartford for Oklahoma, and since we've come to the Archdiocese of Denver. And so I've been with them for those 8 years going on 9.
So our primary apostolate is to pray, and then our secondary apostolate would be to do exorcism work, and so that's exclusively what we do. We don't do any other type of pastoral work. So, to my knowledge, even though there are other religious communities that are trying to start in the sense like we are, it differentiates us from the fact that we're semi-contemplative and we do exorcism work. There is one group that does do exorcism work, but I don't think they're semi-contemplative. And they're semi-contemplatives but they don't do exorcism. So we're different in that sense. Originally, the idea to start something similar to this came from Blessed Francisco Palau, who tried to start this in the late 1800s, the same kind of thing that we're trying to start. But he was unable to accomplish that, and our hope is to be able to establish the society as a society of diocesan rite, in which we can maintain the semi-contemplative life and then eventually have different locations around the country.
Challenges in this life in many ways, I think, is not so different than any other state in life, any other work as a priest. Each context has its own challenges, and so as a in families and raising children, or as a parish priest, or as a religious priest, contemplative order, this particular apostolate, whatever it might be. I think what the common challenge is to all of them is to keep to try to keep the daily focus on what it is we're about and why in our particular state in life or particular ministry. And then keeping that intentionality and recollection and focusing on the Lord. And that's part of why this is the first charism of the semi-contemplative life, is to keep that proper balance. So in this work in particular, to not get pulled into constant work in this area, because it could be very spiritually harmful to not have the time to step back from that and kind of reset.
We see people a lot of times, even in town, and they say, "Oh, what do you do?" And we say, "Well, we do counseling for people with severe spiritual problems." And they say, "Can you see me? I need counseling." And so all of a sudden you're wearing the cassock, you're in town even, and they're talking to you. And then the other thing that I noticed is that when people will call, even when you're on vacation or something like that, they call and they say, "I'm having this problem, that problem, the other problem." They say, "Can I ask you this?" So okay. And I have these different problems, and you start to describe what our protocol is, what we do, and they hang up, and then a lady called me back 2 weeks later and said, "It's changed our lives." Just a small amount of talk I did, just described it a little bit. And they started doing it. And she called back just, euphoric, everything's changing. Grace is flowing. Where there's, where sin abounds, grace superabounds, right? So grace flows through everybody who wants to help and wants to pray. And so I think that's what's happening, is that God is gracing everyone through our simple efforts. So
I think that leading the semi-contemplative life has helped to deepen my spiritual life and obviously become a man of prayer. But right before the first time before I was actually asked to be an exorcist, about a month before that, I said to our Lord, "Make me a man of prayer." This was not quite what I had, the idea that I had, but it did turn out to be that way. But I think the primary thing that it actually helps is that every exorcist will say that two things that happen is your own spiritual life deepens for two reasons. One, you get attacked, and so you have to shore up your own defects and your own difficulties, but you have to increase your prayer life and your fasting and your mortification in order to do this. So everything that the saints had always said you need to do to become a saint, you basically have to, or you'll end up failing as an exorcist. And this is one of the things that we see from time to time with exorcists. The other part of it is just being able to see people liberated. So the first is your own spiritual life comes up. But then also being able to see people actually liberated from possession, and in that process of the liberation, which is a 6-stage process, but when people are liberated and you're praying with them, the fact that the truths of the Catholic faith become extraordinarily clear to you, because the demons always fall in relationship to some point of Catholic theology. And so that particular aspect of Catholic theology becomes much more alive, much more real. And also just the interplay between the saints and the person who's possessed and the whole and the demons in that process gives you a clarity about the truth of the afterlife, about what we were taught as Catholics about the saints, their lives, and also just the truths of the Catholic faith becomes much more alive. Probably one of the best lines I heard, which is probably one of the best ways to describe the life of an exorcist, was done by an exorcist in Rome who said, basically exorcism is the Catholic life writ large. So it gives you a much clearer impression of the truth of the Catholic faith.
And when you see how really the people that are experiencing that in their lives, of how much that weighs on them, and that you're now helping to bring them that liberation, through the grace, through the power of Christ, and how we ourselves, you begin to see and to recognize this is something that you have to be very dedicated to for a long period of time, sometimes with people, where you'll be working with them for months. It's not just this, you just go in and, say some things and, shine a crucifix and all this, and then suddenly it just all disappears. You see how in the way that we approach this, this is very disciplined. You see the people that are suffering from this, how this is something that has just been weighing on them for sometimes a long time in their lives before they even come to recognize how to seek that help. And so I think seeing that and understanding that for the first time, and seeing and witnessing somebody who's going through that, it was a very moving experience, because it made me realize how important this is, to have this ministry within the church, and to see that I think there's not enough of us dedicated to this ministry. There's so many people in need, and there's still so few people really available and the way they need to be to help these individuals. And so I think that's another part that I came to see and recognize is I didn't really understand the need that was there until I became a part of this ministry. And then now I see that it's like, the harvest is plenty, the workers are few, right?
Back in Arkansas, where I first was able to witness some exorcism sessions when I was first learning more about this, and what struck me the most was simply that it was a moment of real prayer and faith and the work of God. And anything that I think that would be in most people's imagination is what the devil's doing, what the demons are doing, all the different things. And there's some of that, but that is not even secondary. It's now on the list. It's like, it's what God is doing. It's what Our Lady is doing. It's what the angels are doing. It's what the saints are doing. That's what comes through. That's what shines through. And so I think the misperceptions of people is so much of like, the fear of that or the shock of that or whatever it might be. And the reality, the most of it is simply, it's like, this is the prayer of the church. This is the work of God for people in this particular way. And that's what you see. And that's what shines through. And that's the beauty of it.
The Hollywood thing is probably the biggest, because, the Amityville Horror and things like that, those kinds of movies really misrepresent, first and foremost, what exorcists really do. a lot of times it's a lot less dramatic. It is long term. It is a dedicated ministry that you like I said, you may be working with somebody for several years before you get to that point of liberation. But you see within Hollywood and how they portray it, it's all the sensationalism and all of that. And there's even some, I would say, within the Catholic Church that unfortunately fall into that as well. And they get on the internet and they're reporting all these different things, and I just think there's something in that when you're taking that and you're now kind of making yourself into kind of a movie star of sorts. I think that's so contrary to the ministry we do. Because for one thing, the demons can play into that pride, and pretty soon you find some of these priests who are having to tell all their sensational stories about this and that, and I think they do a disservice to the ministry as a whole, because that's I think if they had the proper training and the proper understanding of what they're really supposed to do, that they wouldn't be allowing themselves to kind of be used in that way. So I think that's something we have to really keep in mind, is to always stay away from the sensational when talking about this particular ministry, and to make sure there's a certain amount of humility that guides us in the work we do.
Well, the danger is that it foments a curiosity. Here we're not talking about the general term that is used in English, where I just have an interest in something, intellectual interest in things. Here we're talking specifically the vice of curiosity, which is a vice in which a person seeks knowledge that's not proper to their state in life. It's not healthy. It's not beneficial to them. They don't need to know those particular things. What they need to know about the spiritual warfare are the basic principles and how it works, which is what I've tried to emphasize in my public writing and in my public teaching for that particular aspect of it. And the curiosity gets people mired down in seeking emotional delights in the things that they're actually seeing. It can also, people think, well, this will help my faith or help other people's faith, when in point in fact it actually doesn't. It just sucks people into giving attention to the demons rather than to God himself. And that's the real danger in the curiosity, is that it tends to give the demons more credit, or it tends to give the demons more emphasis than they should be given. Quite frankly, they should be ignored to the degree that we can, and it's really God should be our focus. So I think that it tends to take people's focus off of God and what they need to learn as Catholics. I think the biggest difficulty is that if people need to see, they need to spend time learning more about the structure, the nature of the warfare, so that they can engage in it well. They need to learn more about their faith so that they can grow in holiness. And what they need to know about the spiritual warfare should only be to the degree that's necessary to engage in it well, but no more and no less, whereas the curiosity tends to become the focus rather than God.
Somebody asked me, well, how many people are under diabolical influence? I said, all of us, to one degree or another, we are under some kind of diabolical influence. They're working on us all the time. And I said, and our nation, like as a whole, is oppressed. I mean, it's the amount of oppression out there is incredible. And yet, instead of getting people to really see and recognize what that really is, because that oppression is working in subtle ways, not sensational, subtle ways. And how many people are just under that all the time? And yet Hollywood is and others are they're just focusing only on the sensational. And so people are missing that understanding that the diabolical influence works in a lot more subtle ways. The demons are very crafty. They're very cunning. They can basically, more or less keep somebody in the place they want that person, because it'll even convince them, demons don't even exist. And so once you believe demons don't exist, you don't resist them. And if they see you're exactly where they want you, they kind of leave you alone because they more or less are like, yeah, you're doing exactly what we need you to do. And so I think that understanding of just how much we are under that diabolical influence, and that it's not going to be shown to us in some big dramatic way usually. It's going to be in those very subtle, almost hidden ways that the demons are using an influence in our lives.
Being a structural engineer in my past life before I went to the seminary, I've been put in charge of all the plans and so forth because I've had experience with building. And so what we're going to do is we need 2 rooms for the priests, 2 priests that we have capacity for. Right now we have 4 priests here. We have capacity in our statutes for 6. And then once we have more than that, then we talk about opening up another house somewhere. So we really need room for 6 priests, if you will, on a permanent level. And so we need 2 more rooms now because we're getting inquiries from different priests. Can I come? I'm thinking about this. And they are discerning this work. So those 2 extra rooms, then after those rooms, we're going to get into the sacristy and the chapel. So the sacristy and chapel will be on one level. And then above the sacristy, we will have a classroom / library, study room, where you can fit maybe 10, 15 priests. And then above that, we're going to have a little observation where we can sit and talk, where we can have fellowship, if you will, and with the rest of the priests, and see the beautiful areas we have here. And so that's going to be on a 3rd floor. After the priest rooms, we're going to have the sacristy and then the chapel. So the sacristy will be at the end of those rooms. And then the chapel kind of makes a right-hand turn and faces east because of the Mass. As always throughout the history of the church, the priest was facing east, ad orientem. And so our main altar with the tabernacle on it the priest will be facing east. And then we have side chapels or side alcoves with altars in them. So we have 4 more. And so for the 6 priests that can be here maximum, we would have actually 5 altars. And with the old rite, we can say Mass at the same time, not exactly the same time, but staggered by just a few minutes. And so you could actually have legitimately 5 priests saying Mass at the same time.
The expansion is necessary because the way our constitutions are structured is that we are, once we reach 7 priests, we split, but we haven't reached that yet. So we're like the Carmelites in the sense that we've found in another location. But as it is now, the current location that we have can only really accommodate 4 priests. We do have another place where we can put a 5th priest, but we need to add priest suites. We also have to share a chapel. So because we say the extraordinary form, that means that we have to schedule 4 or 5 masses in the morning, very often before we go and do our exorcism work. And so that results in having a bit of a time crunch. We also, even though we don't pray in common, except for on major feast days, the difficulty of getting us all into a small chapel creates a difficulty. So getting a chapel built, getting an adequate sacristy. We're also going to be building on top of the sacristy will also be a classroom, because we do formation of lay people who assist priests in exorcism work. We also train other priests to be exorcists. When I used to teach for the Leo the 13th, It was a 2-year program, and bishops were telling us that they had a difficulty with waiting 2 years for a priest to come up to speed. So we contracted that down to 1 week intensive formation, academic, and then they come for another week for practical experience in session. And so that classroom will provide an important role. We also provide about once or twice a year a class for priests who are may not necessarily be exorcists, but they want to learn a deliverance work for the sake of their faithful or particular region in which they live. And so that expansion will help that. But the chapel will give us the ability to have masses going on at various times for all of us to be present during when we do say the office in common, and then or prayers in common, and then also the priest suites will help that expansion so that we can continue to help more people.
The purpose of this video and this appeal is for funds to build a chapel. We are completely at the Blessed Mother's whim. Whatever she wants, that's what we do. So when we started in Oklahoma, we assumed, okay, we're going to be a society in Oklahoma. Nope, she didn't want us there. We're here in Denver. We're assuming we're going to be here. We wait for not signs, but indications that, yes, this is what she wants, because we're open to her. If she wants us to be a society, that's what we're working for. If she doesn't want us to be a society, we don't want to be a society, because we want exactly what she desires. We are her slaves. So she brings one aspect, and then another, and then another. Enough to subsist, money to subsist, which people have been so generous with us. And thanking them, I'd like to thank them, personally, because I see the money come in, and this is phenomenal to me. I mean, people's generosity is so incredible. But that is because our Blessed Mother is inspiring them to do this. And we have this house now as the generosity of donors. Again, she has provided it for us. Then we start to get priests coming. She's provided the vocations. Those are the things that the bishop wants to see, that you can support yourself, that you have a place, a permanent place, a residence, and that you have vocations. And we have those things. And right now we're kind of running out of room, which is a good thing, but it's also something that we need to do something about. We have to plan. We have to go forward, and I am confident that the Blessed Mother will provide, because I believe that she's provided everything else. That it's an indication that she wants us to be a society of diocesan right in Denver. That's what it seems to me. And so we're on that road, and we're asking for this, participation from people. But we have total and complete confidence in our Blessed Mother, because she's made us wait, and she's made us move, and she's made us do these things, and we become more docile because of it, which I'm so thankful for it. And now I think, in my opinion, that she wants us to have this and become a society here in Denver. And if she doesn't, I'm okay with that too, because again, we want what she wants. And so if all the people that have been a part of this, we want to thank, and it's very difficult because there's so many people that have been so generous with us, and we want to thank all of them for all the generosity they've shown in the past, and we hope that they can be a part of this. But if not, that's fine too. We are still praying for you. You're all benefactors, and we want you to know that this is all a group effort to follow Our Lady, quite frankly.
I ask you to join me in helping to build the chapel and priest residences by contributing to the project by visiting our website, Dolorans.org. All donations are tax deductible, and as with all things, we place this project in the hands of our most sorrowful Mother. May God reward and bless you, and Mary keep you.